Hey guys, my name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be doing the 2020 reading survey end of the year book tag thing. And this is a video that I've done pretty consistently every year now, and I just really like this particular tag instead of questions and stuff because I feel like it really wraps up your year in a really convenient way because you get to talk about like your most read genre of the year, the books that made you laugh the most, the books that made you cry the most, you know, it's all of the kind of like superlatives for the end of the year. So I think this is a really cool and fun tag, so I'll leave the previous years that I've done this down below if you want to see those. But let's get right into the questions. So the first one says, how many books did you read this year? I'm currently filming this on December 20th, so it's not quite the end of the year yet, but as of right now, I've read 143 books this year. The next question says, did you meet your goal? And the answer is yes, because I always set a goal of 100 books for myself in the year because I don't want to put too much pressure on myself. But this year I've read the most books than I've ever read in a year ever, so yes. The next one says your most read genre this year, and I actually just calculated that total last night, and it's thrillers. I read 42 thrillers this year. Isn't that just wild? That's pretty high. The next question is the longest and shortest books that you read this year. So I'm pretty sure the longest book that I read this year is 11/22/63 by Stephen King, and this one is 849 pages. And then the shortest book that I read this year is Blanky, and it's only 73 pages. The next one says your favorite book that was published in the year of 2020. This is one of the tougher questions because there were so many great books published this year, but I think my top two favorites is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by Victoria Schwab and Loveless by Alice Oseman. Both of these books were my top two books of the year, and they were both published this year. The next one says favorite debut that came out in 2020, so this just means an author's first published debut book, and I would say Shipped by Angie Hockman for this because I did read this one this year, but technically this book doesn't come out until 2021, so I don't know if that's a fair answer. But I would also say The Roommate by Rosie Danan. This book did publish in 2020, and this is this author's first debut romance novel, and after this book I will read anything this author writes in the future. I loved this book. Next question says favorite book that was not published in the year of 2020 but you read for the first time in 2020, and that would have to be The Troop by Nick Cutter and The Dream Daughter by Diane Chamberlain. I would also say Kill Creek for this, actually. I totally forgot, but these three books. The next question is a book that did live up to the hype, and I would definitely say Addie LaRue definitely did live up to the hype for me because I know that book is being super hyped right now. But I would also add Home Before Dark and The Guest List to this, at least for me. I know these books are definitely getting overhyped right now on booktube, but I personally love them both so much. They were both 5-star books for me, and I do think that they are worthy of that hype. Next question is a book that did not live up to the hype, and I've got to go with Beach Read by Emily Henry because this book was so freaking hyped this year, and I just do not understand the hype. I didn't get that from this book. It was still okay. It was like a 3-star book for me, but it just didn't live up to the hype that I created for it. And also Dr. Sleep by Stephen King. I've heard so much great stuff about this, and I just really hated it. I really didn't like this book. The next question says the book that felt like the biggest accomplishment after finishing it. And I mean, of course, 11/22/63 felt like a huge accomplishment after finishing this book just because it's so freaking long. But I would also say Middle Game by Shauna McGuire. It really did feel like an accomplishment to finish this book because this book is over 500 pages, and I've had it on my TBR for like nearly a year and a half now, so it's just been such a long time that I've been wanting to read this book, and to have finally finished it and read it, I just felt very accomplished with that. Even though it wasn't my favorite, it was like a 3.5 out of 5 or so, but I've still felt very accomplished after reading this book, especially because it's a little bit outside of my comfort zone, so I was pretty proud of myself for being able to finish a book like this. The next question says your favorite character that you read about in 2020, and this question is really hard, so I have 5. The first one is Georgia from Loveless, one of my most relatable characters of all time. I also loved Jo March from Little Women. I can't believe I read Little Women for the first time this year, but Jo March is one of my most relatable characters of all time. I also really loved Darcy and Elle from Written in the Stars, but especially Darcy. And then Addie LaRue, of course, from The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is one of my favorite characters of the year, as well as Scarlett from They Never Learn. She's such a bad bitch, and I just love her so much, and she's definitely one of my favorite characters that I read this year. The next question says your least favorite character that you read this year, and that is by far, without a doubt, Caleb from Credence by Penelope Douglas. Freaking couldn't stand this book. Next question says the most shocking book or shocking moment that you had with a book in the year of 2020. And for me, that's gotta be Layla by Colleen Hoover. I feel like everything about this book shocked me. And I feel like this book can't really be defined by a genre. I mean, it's I think it's considered paranormal romance, but I would also define this as like thriller, and sometimes it has like horror vibes, and I don't even know what this book is. It's its own monster, it's its own thing, but I loved it. I was shocked by it. I was very, very shocked by the things happening in this book. The next one says your biggest OTP from this year, like your favorite couple that you read about this year, and I have a few different answers for this as well because I read so many cute romance books this year. The first one is Josh and Clara from The Roommate. Oh my god, I am trash for this book and I am trash for this ship. And I also have Elle and Darcy, of course, from Written in the Stars, and Danny and Zaf from Take a Hint, Danny Brown. They were so cute. The next question is the best written book that you read in the year. And I've got to say, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is definitely probably the best written book that I've read this year, just because the writing style is so incredibly unique. It's really comforting, and I kind of explained this in my best books of the year video, but it almost has this writing where it makes me feel nostalgic for something that I've never even experienced, and I've just never really had a reading experience like I had with this book. It's definitely one of the most beautifully written books that I've ever read. But very close behind that would probably be The Death of Vivek Oji. And this is one that I actually like listened to the audiobook at the same time while I was reading the book. And this book is just written in a way that is just so stunning and so beautiful. And I was like quoting and tabbing so many different parts in this book because of how beautifully it was written, and I just really enjoyed it. The next question is the book that you pushed the most people to read in 2020, and that's gotta be The Troop by Nick Cutter, which I kind of feel bad about because I feel like this is a book that really caters to my specific taste in horror, but I know that this book is probably way too graphic and gory and just disgusting for most people, so I kind of feel bad for like pushing this book on so many people, but also it's just one of my favorite books of all time and I can't help it. Anytime I think somebody says they read The Troop because of me, it's always like a negative, like, why would you make me read this? And they're mostly disturbed about it, and like, I'm sorry, but it's one of my favorite books ever and I love it so much. But I also feel like I have been pushing Kill Creek and The Nesting on a lot of people just because I haven't heard a whole lot about both of these books, at least on booktube. Like, I just don't see them talked about very often, so I do feel like I'm currently pushing these two books on a lot of people right now. Next question says your favorite book cover of the year, and for a book that wasn't published in 2020 but it's one of my favorite book covers of the year is The Saturday Night Ghost Club. I really love this book cover. It looks so vintage and so cute. But for a book that was published this year, I would probably say The Death of Vivek Oji is one of my favorite covers of the year. It's just so stunning. I love these colors. It's freaking beautiful. The next question is your favorite book to movie adaptation of the year. And I would definitely say Little Women is my favorite adaptation that I've read this year. I actually saw the movie adaptation for the first time this year, the new one with Greta Gerwig's adaptation with Saoirse Ronan. And I read the book for the first time this year shortly after I watched the movie, and I made a reading vlog for this one, so I'll link that down below. But this was such an enjoyable experience, and I almost liked seeing the movie before I read the book because then I could just picture those characters in my head while I was reading it, and I was already familiar with the story, but it was still so great to revisit these characters, and I just loved it so much. And I feel like Greta Gerwig's adaptation of this book is so well done. Like, it's so freaking good. And the next question is what book made you laugh the most? And I would probably have to say Shipped by Angie Hockman definitely made me laugh the most this year. And I mean laughed in like a way that I was just like kind of giddy and like giggling to myself a lot and just smiling and just being like so happy, because I don't read a lot of books that are like comedic books, you know, like it's not usually something I gravitate towards. But in romance novels, I really love like romantic comedy aspect in romance novels. I live for the comedy, and this book just made me so happy and warm and fuzzy, and I was giggling a lot. It was really great. And then of course we have which book made you cry the most, which, you know, I think we all know the answer to this is probably Loveless by Alice Oseman. I have an entire reading vlog of me bawling my eyes out over this book that will be linked down below. And also 11/22/63 by Stephen King. It was particularly the ending of this book that made me cry a whole lot. And also The Death of Vivek Oji. Like, holy shit, I bawled my eyes out at the end of this book. Like, I'm glad I was listening to the audiobook for this because I probably wouldn't have been able to read any of the words. I was crying so hard. The next question says a new favorite author that you discovered this year. And I have a few answers for this one as well. I would definitely say Tiffany D. Jackson. I read 2 of her books this year, and she's definitely one of the only young adult authors where I'm really gravitating towards her books, and her writing is just so beautiful. And her stories are also really like hard-hitting and really touching, and so she's definitely a new favorite author for me. As well as Britt Bennett. I read 2 of her books this year, and her books are more like literary fiction, kind of like historical fiction sometimes. I really loved both of the books I read from her this year. I also discovered Stephen Graham Jones this year, who is kind of like a horror author. I read 2 books from him this year, and Night of the Mannequins is definitely my favorite that I read from him, but I'm definitely interested in checking out more of his backlist, and I'm really looking forward to anything he comes out with in the future. And then also Alice Oseman. I didn't discover Alice Oseman this year, but I feel like I really started to become obsessed with Alice Oseman this year, because previously I'm pretty sure I've only read Radio Silence, and then this year I've read 3 of her books, this one and along with the Heartstopper series, and I just feel like I've really started to love and obsess over her writing, and I just want to read all of her books ever. So yeah, Alice Oseman, it's great. And you know, she's like really close to my age, which is like really cool. The next one says guilty pleasure read of the year, and that would have to be The Roommate, because I feel like so many people didn't really like this book, and you know, this book is definitely not going to be for everyone because the guy in this book is a porn star, and that's like what he does. And then this is a romance about how he starts to develop feelings for his roommate, Clara. Sounds like something I probably wouldn't enjoy, but there was just something about this book. It was just so steamy and like the perfect amount of steam. Like sometimes it can be a little like overkill for me, but it was just perfect. And I loved Josh and Clara as characters, and I thought their chemistry was so cute. I just really loved it, but I feel like now this is definitely a guilty pleasure because there's so many people that are not enjoying this book, so it makes me feel like it's a guilty pleasure of mine now. Next question says your favorite reread of the year, and I would probably say Long Bright River by Liz Moore, because I actually read this book for the first time this year, and then I reread it again this year because of how much I loved it. And again, I don't really know what it is about this book, but I just get the urge to reread this book like all the time. And I don't know what that says about me, but I just really love the atmosphere in this book. I love the way it's written. I love the way that it's kind of centered on this relationship between these 2 sisters, even though it's a really complicated and hard relationship because one of them is a cop and one of them is a drug addict. And I just think there's just something about this book. I just loved it. I added an extra question in this list because I do read a lot of nonfiction books as well, and so I just had a question, what are the best nonfiction books that you read this year? Because I wanted a place to talk about those specifically. Some of the more educational nonfiction books that I read this year that I really loved are So You Want to Talk About Race and She Said. So You Want to Talk About Race talks about race, if it wasn't obvious, and then She Said kind of deals with sexual violence against women. And I just think both of these nonfiction books were so freaking incredible and moving and educational, and I feel like they should be required reading for everyone. And then some of my other favorite nonfiction books included A Promised Land by Barack Obama. This audiobook was just so educational and so inspiring. I loved it so much, and I miss Obama so much. He's just so humble and so down to earth and so freaking cool. And then I also really loved listening to Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey, despite the fact that some of this kind of feels like a self-help book, which I wasn't a huge fan of that, but I just really loved this book. I loved listening to the audiobook. He's just so charismatic with the way that he talks, and he's just really interesting to listen to, and he has a really interesting life story. So I definitely recommend the audiobook of this because his voice is just, it's everything. It's so great. And yeah, the last question says, were you happy with your reading year? And obviously, like I said in the beginning, yes, I'm very happy with my reading this year. I feel like I was able to read more this year than I've ever read in a year before due to the pandemic, you know, because I wasn't doing a lot of things that I usually do, like going out, and I'm not that much of a social butterfly anyways, but the fact that I was home a lot more this year than I would have been, it helped me read a lot more than I ever have before. And I got some books off of my long TBR that I've been wanting to read for a really long time that are more lengthy books that I would be intimidated to read otherwise. So yeah, I'm really happy with this reading year. I thought I had a really great reading year, and I read a lot of really great books. And my average rating was higher than it's ever been before because it's like a 3.7 or 3.8 out of 5 this year, which is totally nuts because in years before it's been a 3.5 pretty consistently. So that just tells me I've had a really great reading year. So those are all of the questions. If you agree or disagree with any of the books that are on this list, please let me know. And also let me know, what are your favorite book to movie adaptations that you saw and read this year? And what are some books that made you laugh the most this year? What are the books that made you cry the most this year? Please answer any of these questions down below because I'm genuinely really curious and I would love to know. And thank you guys so much for watching as always, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye.
What are we fighting for? Back into this no more.